Namaskaraha and welcome to our next session on the yogic life. So, what is the way to freedom from bondage? So, we might have covered this topic some time back, but it's a good thing to revisit the topic. Mana eva manishyanam karanam bandhamoksayoho bandha tu vishayasangi muktah nirvishayam tata. So, the mind is the cause of bondage, and the mind is also the cause of liberation. Right? Why is the mind the cause of bondage and also the cause of liberation? So if you look at the beings other than human beings, they don't have the mental independence, they don't have an independent mind. So the mind operates according to the inborn instincts, right? Beyond the inborn instincts they cannot go. But when we look at human beings, what is the uniqueness of human beings is that we have an independent mind. So if we want, we can make the mind come under bondage, and if we desire, we can liberate the mind, right? So the mind is the cause of bondage and also of the cause of liberation. So there is no mental liberty in other beings other than human beings, which have an undeveloped and underdeveloped mind. They just operate according to the inborn instincts. They have no choice before them. They are guided by their inborn propensities. But when we look at human beings, we have an independent mind. We can do according to the desire of the mind. If the choices that we make are in the favor of salvation, then we attain salvation. If the choices that we make are in the favor of worldly bondages, then we get bound, then we get worldly bondage. So that is the main thing, and that is the difference between the animals and human beings. So how can we become great, right? So when the object of the mind is small and limited, right, then the subjective portion of the mind also becomes small. So when we say the object of the mind, means the objects before us, and we know that the mind has three parts, and the chitta takes the shape of the external objects. When the chitta takes the shape of the external objects, which are all limited, then the mind becomes small. But when the objectivated portion of the mind is very vast, great, infinite, then the mind also becomes big, right? The subjective portion of the mind becomes big. So then we say he's a great man. So if we are constantly thinking about the external objects, then the chitta is constantly taking the shape of the external objects. We are thinking about a pen, a book, a house, a car, right, or a job, or whatever, right? Those are all the objects of the world, external world, and the mind takes the shape of those external objects. Then the mind becomes very small. It becomes sankuchitam, becomes contracted. But when the mind thinks about that supreme, that infinite entity, then the mind becomes big. The mind becomes enlarged. It expands, right? So that is how we become great. As we think, so we become. So to become great or to become small, right, depends on the mental object, right? The choices that you make. If you choose the external objects of the world, right, that is your choice, because your mind has that independence to choose. If you choose those external objects, then the mind becomes small, right? On the other hand, if you choose the infinite entity, then the mind becomes enlarged, right? So how do we make the mind enlarged, right? So that is why in the shloka we said bandha tu vishaya sangi muktah nirvishayam tata, right? When the object of the world is small, then the mind gets entrapped in that finite things. Then what happens? We think that those finite things are everything for us in this world. Then the jiva becomes baddha. He becomes bound. But when the object of the mind is ananta, right, the anadi ananta satta, right, so then the mind also, it grows and expands, and it also becomes that ananta, right? Then it gets engrossed in happiness, it gets immersed in happiness, right? Then we call the jiva as a mukta jiva. So whether a jiva is baddha or whether a jiva is mukta, is everything is in our hands, the choices that we make, right? Pashaihi baddha bhavet jivaha, one who is bound by the pashas, right? One who is pashaihi muktaha bhavet shivaha. So whether we want to be jiva or whether we want to be shiva is in our hands. If we are bound by all the pashas, right, all the external objects, and then we become a jiva, if we get liberated from those external bondages, then we become shiva. So essentially, what is the object of your mind, right? We should contemplate on that at any point in time. What is the object of your mind? What are you thinking about? You are constantly thinking about the external object, then you are going to remain bound and you are going to remain a jiva, right? There are ashta pashas and the shad ripus, right? Kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, and all of those things, right? They all bind the mind. So when we say kama, then there is an object for the kama. That means I desire something, I am desiring some external object. When you are having krodha, then there is an object for that krodha, right? Then we remain as jiva. So when the object is small, the object is little, then one gets completely immersed in that littleness, then one becomes an ordinary jiva, right? Pasha baddha bhavet jivaha. Pasha means bondage, and pasha muktaha bhavet shivaha. When one frees oneself from the bondages of the pasha, one becomes shiva. When the object is infinite, right, when the object of the mind is infinite, if you are constantly thinking about Paramapurusha, then that is the object of your mind, and the chitta takes the shape of that Paramapurusha. Then the infinite cannot be bought under the bondage, under any bondage, right? Because Paramapurusha is not bound, he is free from all bondages, he is not under the control of Prakriti. If we say we are bound, what we mean is we are under the control of Prakriti. So we'll have restlessness. If you are under the control of Prakriti, we'll have restlessness, we'll be bound by the gunas, right? The mind goes up and down, up and down, up and down. I'm feeling restless, I'm feeling demotivated, I'm feeling that my mind is jumping from one thing to another, right? So but when the mind is constantly thinking about Paramapurusha, that itself is an abhyasa, right? Mind cannot constantly think about Paramapurusha all the time. So how do we do that abhyasa? We have to do that abhyasa, we have to train the mind, right? So when we do the abhyasa of constantly thinking about Paramapurusha, then the mind becomes Shiva, right? So whether we want to be jiva or whether we want to be jiva and bound by the pasha, or whether we want to be liberated from the pasha and become Shiva, is everything in our hands. That is why I say mana eva karanam. The mind is very, very important. Mind is the karanam. So always we need to contemplate what is the object of the mind at any point in time. What am I thinking about? We rarely think about that. We keep jumping from one thing to another, and we take pride in saying that we are multitasking. In today's world, if you go for a job or something, they will say, are you able to multitask? Right? They say that it's a great thing to multitask, right? They don't understand that we cannot multitask. At any one point in time, we can only take one object at a time, right? And the change is happening so quickly that we are thinking we are multitasking. Actually, we are not multitasking. We can only take one object at a time. Chitta can take the shape of only one object at a time, right? So we take an object of a particular thing at a time, and then we drop it and we take something else, right? And we think that we call it as multitasking, and we think it's a great thing, right? In today's world, you don't get a job if you don't multitask. That's what they say. But what we are talking about here is constantly taking the shape of the supreme entity, right? And what is that spiritual practice that you need to do to free yourself and become Shiva, right? So your spiritual practice is a never-ending endeavor to free yourself from the bondages of pasha. It is not that you just do it for 1 second, it's gone. You constantly take the shape of that supreme entity. By taking the shape of the supreme entity constantly, day in and day out, you become that supreme entity, and then you're freed from all bondages. You don't have this sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha. I want this, I don't want that. Nothing, none of that. You're constantly in bliss, right? When you're constantly in bliss. So sometimes it so happens, if you very, in the world it is very common thing that sometimes you deeply desire something, right? You very deeply desire an object of the world. Let's say that you deeply desire to buy a car, right? And you desperately want this car, right? Let's say there's a Mercedes and you want that car desperately, and you're day in and day out thinking about it and you're dreaming about it, right? And then let's say that you wanted a loan and you were waiting for that loan to buy this car, and for some reason that loan didn't get sanctioned, right? And you're not so much in dukkha, right? First you were thinking you were going to get the loan and you were like happy, oh, I'm going to get the loan, I'm going to buy this. But now you're not going to get the loan and you have become extremely sad, right? In that situation, you're in a desperate situation where you don't mind doing anything to get that car because you wanted it so badly. But then what happens is, right, if in that situation, if you let go of that object and say, I don't want this anymore, right? It's a difficult thing to do. But if you free yourself from that, I don't want this anymore, see how happy you are. Right? You said, I don't want this. You're just kicking it and you're saying, I don't want it anymore. Right? In that situation, the happiness that you feel is immense because you just freed from that external object. That external object was holding you under control. Right? You freed it. When you freed it, what happens? You're just feeling liberated. Like that, in this world, there are so many things that keep you bound. Right? You need to free yourself. How do you free yourself? You need to let go of those objects. Right? Those objects are holding you and they're controlling you. Right? They've taken control over your life. All of those different objects that you desire, they've taken control of your life. So you need to let go those objects. Right? So when you let go those objects, what happens is that you become freed. You become freed from those objects. Then you get you feel light. Right? You feel very light. You don't feel that heaviness of your heart is reduced. Right? So as spiritual aspirants, we need to know what a pasha is. This is what a pasha is. Right? How do we free ourselves from these pashas? Right? We need to free ourselves from these pashas. And how do we free ourselves from these pashas? By engaging in yogic life. By engaging in yogic life, by doing sadhana. By doing sadhana. And for that, the ahara and all the angas, yoga angas, ahara, upavasa, satvika ahara, upavasa, all of those things are very, very important. Right? And last week we talked about the ahara. Right? One thing that I want to reiterate that on that topic, on the satvika ahara, is that we should not consume onion and garlic, which is a very basic thing. We've been talking from day one. Right? Onion and garlic, they are tamasic. Right? They are tamasic and they are very harmful. Right? So we should not consume onion and garlic. And one may ask, right, I've been eating for so many years, nothing has happened. Why are you saying this? Right? I've been eating for years and years. I don't see any difference. Why are you saying this? And it enhances the taste and this and that. All of that we can say. But unless you stop and see what is the impact on your mind, you're not going to understand even if somebody says 1,000 times that you have to stop onion and garlic. So yogic life is very, very practical experience. Right? Your life is like an experience. Your body is a tool, is a laboratory. Right? So you need to implement something and see how it is impacting you. Right? Take a particular item, implement it in your life and see how it is impacting me. Implement something and see how it is impacting me. So you need to have the courage to try. Right? Okay, somebody is saying something. How do I trust what she's saying? Why should I trust what she's saying? Then what is the only way you have is to try. Right? Try and see how it is. Oh yeah, now I can understand what you're saying. Try and see. Try. So you should not lose the courage and say that I am not going to try. Right? I cannot. That word I cannot should be removed from your dictionary. So the most thing that we very often hear in the yogic life is, oh, this is okay for you, it's not working for me. I cannot try this. Right? when you do that, that means you're closing all the doors, right? We should not close the doors. We should be open to something. We should be open to listening to something and trying to implement that and say that, see how it is, right? Implement one thing, see how it is. Implement one thing, see how it is. And you implement everything, all of it, and see how it is. Because the problem with in our yogic life classes is that people don't try. They don't even have the courage to try, right? Why can't you dedicate 2 months of your life for trying every aspect of yogic life and try completely and see how it is? And then you can say, okay, fine. Then you can take it or reject it, right? So you haven't even tried, then how can you reject it? Okay, so that is what is happening, is people don't have the courage to try. So what is essentially the most important thing that we need in the yogic life classes is to have an open mind to see what is being said, is it true or not? Because everything, we hear something in the yogic life class, when you go outside we hear something different, right? The doctors would say something. In today's world, doctors say all different kinds of things. They say onion is very good, garlic is very good. They would say different things, right? But what they're saying, is it true? And what we are saying, is it true? How do we know that, right? So that we can experiment that in our own life. We can experiment that and see what the impact the food is having on our body, right? So if we eat certain food, they're very, very constipating, right? So we know if we eat these foods, then the body becomes constipated, right? How do we know that? We experience it ourselves. Oh, I have eaten this and that's why I'm feeling constipated, right? So if we didn't eat that, we wouldn't feel constipated. So like that, every food has an impact on the body, and we would not know that unless we try it. So that is the one thing that we always have to do as spiritual aspirants. To progress in the spiritual life, we should have the courage to try different things. Without trying, you cannot reject something, right? So only if you try, that Parama Purusha will shower his kripa vrishti on you, right? Only a person does the chesta, who says, hey Parama Purusha, I'm ready to go on the spiritual path. Until that, he won't show you the path, right? He will not show you the path. You need to have an open mind. And let's say that the Parama Purusha himself appears before you and says that you have to do all of these things. Even then we may question. We may say that, oh, this is not Parama Purusha, right? First we may question, we may reject that this is Parama Purusha, and then second we say that whatever he is saying is not true, right? So that is how the mental attitude has become in today's world, right? We are not having the capacity to decide what is true and what is not, right? So in the case of yogic life, we have an option, we have a choice, because the basic things that we're talking about, the sattvic ahar and all that we can actually try. We can try and see how it is in our life, right? Without trying, we cannot reject something. So that is what I ask. If you have not tried all those things that we've talked, like eliminating onion, garlic, right? Taking the sattvic ahara, taking whole food, plant-based diet, taking raw foods, fruits, vegetables, as much as possible. Unless you're going to try it, you're not going to know the benefits. So having said that, I want to conclude that the topic, that the mind is the karana for bandha and for the moksha. So what is the vishaya for the mind is very, very important. If the vishaya for the mind is the worldly object, then the mind gets bound. If the vishaya for the mind is Shiva, then the mind becomes Shiva. So with that thought, I want to actually go back to our Karapatram. So the Karapatram that we are actually talking about is Yama and Niyama. So there are 8 steps in yoga. The Yama and there are actually Ashtanga yoga, and there we have Yama and Niyama. And so we know in this world there are steps of morality, right? So there is a sahaja naitikata and also adhyatmika naitikata, right? Here Yama and Niyama, we are talking about the adhyatmika naitikata, right? So these Yama and Niyama are 2 important aspects of morality. We have said that simple morality is not sufficient. We have to learn the spiritual morality, 5 in Yama and 5 in Niyama. These are the prerequisites for sadhana, right? In order to follow sadhana, one has to understand these Yama and Niyama and follow them. And in order to completely follow Yama and Niyama, one has to do sadhana. So they both go hand in hand. They're like the two wings of a bird, right? So one will not work without the other. So we actually said that, if we just follow the simple morality, what happens is that if somebody offers you a 2 rupee bribe, you may not take it. But if somebody offers you a very large amount of bribe, you may be tempted to take it. So the tendency to do wrong is there in human beings, right? In some situations, in good situations, we may not do wrong, but in adversity, we may be inclined to do wrong things, right? So how do we remove this tendency of doing wrong things? That is by doing sadhana. By doing sadhana, only then the tendency to do wrong things, the thoughts, the wrong thoughts, all those things will vanish only when we start doing sadhana. And for that, we need to follow the spiritual morality. And to completely follow the spiritual morality, we need to do sadhana sincerely, right? We talked about the 5 lessons of Yama: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Right? These are 5 principles. 5 principles achieve control by different processes, right? It means regulated conduct. How do we change ourselves? In other words, how do we regulate our conduct, right? So the first one we said is ahimsa, right? Ahimsa, manovakkayehi sarvabhutanam apidanam ahimsa, right? Ahimsa means, this is the correct definition of ahimsa, means not inflicting pain or hurt on anybody by thought, word or action, right? So that is what is ahimsa. But it is wrongly interpreted in today's world. From a very long time, this word ahimsa is wrongly interpreted. So one interprets ahimsa in such a way that the thing that it becomes impossible to live in the society, right? That means they think that it is complete prohibition of killing, right? And not even to fight a defensive battle. So in order to survive in this world, right, we have to kill something. We cannot survive without killing something. So even if we are vegetarians and we eat, let's say, rice, even then the paddy has to be killed, right? So without killing something, we cannot survive. So every jiva has a right to survive, right? For human beings, we have a right to survive, and in order to survive, we have to kill something, right? We have to till the soil, right? Till the land, right? If we say that the insects will be killed, we are not going to till the soil, and but we're going to employ somebody else to till the soil, then that is hypocrisy. That is not tilling the soil and growing crops and all. That is not himsa. That is not himsa, even though it involves killing of some insects and microorganisms, but that is not himsa, right? Because every human being have a right for existence, right? So that is one understanding we have to correct, that tilling the soil is okay, and in that process, and something is getting killed, that is actually fine, right? That is not himsa, right? Every being has a right to existence. Like even if you have to take medicine, some bacteria and insects will be killed. So it doesn't mean that we are not going to take medicine, right? Even though it means killing of the bacteria, because we have a right to existence, right? And even if we filter water, we are killing insects. So if you drink unfiltered water, then we may fall sick, right? So in those situations, we cannot have a very narrow interpretation of the word ahimsa, right? So in the religions and all that, this word ahimsa has been misinterpreted, right? We need to understand what the correct meaning of ahimsa is. And also ahimsa is not non-violence, right? So if somebody comes and attacks you and somebody slaps you, it is not that you have to show your other cheek. That is not showing your other cheek is not this one ahimsa, right? So if somebody attacks you, unnecessarily somebody comes and attacks you, you have every right to protect yourself. You have every right to protect yourself. In that process, if you have to take a weapon to protect yourself, if somebody is having a gun in front of you and you have to protect yourself and you're taking some knife or something to protect yourself, then that is not himsa, right? So we need to understand that, right? It is not that the Gandhiji's interpretation of ahimsa, that if somebody slaps you, show the other face. No, that is not the true interpretation of ahimsa. Ahimsa means that you have a right to protect yourself, you should not intentionally cause harm to somebody. That intention is very important, right? So when you grow crops, you're not having the intention to hurt somebody, right? There is no intention. The only reason we are cultivating the crops is for survival, right? If somebody hits you and attacks you and you're protecting yourself, there is no intention to harm the person. The intention is to protect yourself, right? So we need to understand the correct definition of ahimsa, right? So according to the meaning of the word ahimsa in the sphere of sadhana, right, according to the correct meaning, one will have to guide one's conduct carefully to ensure that one's thoughts, actions cause pain to nobody and are unjust to none, right? Any action or thought with the intention of causing harm to someone else is called himsa. So the word intention is very important, right? So the existence of life implies destruction of lower forms, right? No matter whether there is an intention of doing harm or not. So in order to survive, I have to kill something. If there are mosquitoes in the house and they're coming and biting you and you're going to get malaria, then it does mean that you have every right to kill those mosquitoes, right? Because they're causing harm to your own existence, right? If there are ants in your house and they're going entering the food, then that is not good for you, right? Then you have to kill those ants, right? And the killing those ants is not himsa, right? So, and if there are insects attacking the crops, right, you're surviving on the crops and insects are attacking the crops, and in that process you kill those insects or bugs, then that is not himsa, right? So in this world, in the Srishti Chakra, we know that through clash and cohesion that we grow, we move forward, right? In order to move forward, there is a struggle. If there are obstacles in moving forward, we have to remove those obstacles, right? But there are obstacles in our existence. So if you have to go from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, then we need to have, there is certain struggle involved, right? And if there are obstacles, we need food, clothing, shelter, for all of those basic things we need in order to move forward. And if there are obstacles in getting those basic things, then we have to do what we have to do to get those things, right? So rice is obtained from paddy, and there is life in paddy. The paddy can sprout, right? But we have to remove the paddy so that we can get the rice. So there is that there is killing involved there, right? That is not himsa. There is no question of himsa there. There is no question of himsa or ahimsa there, right? So because we can't live on bricks and sand, right? So but what are the two things that we need to remember with regard to edibles is, as far as possible, we should select those items of food which have least development of consciousness, right? In the Srishti Chakra, those things which have least development of consciousness, those things we have to select as our food, not that which have more developed consciousness. So what that means is that we have to select the plants, right? The crops, we need to select that as our food because they have less developed consciousness compared to animals, right? When we kill animals, when we kill, let's say, a cow or a chicken or whatever, that has more comparatively more developed consciousness compared to the plants. So as a rule, we have to select those items in which the development of consciousness is comparatively little, that is vegetables. If vegetables are available, then the animals must not be killed, right? And before killing, if there is extreme circumstances where plants are not available, then before killing any animal, right, having developed or undeveloped consciousness, it must be considered whether it is possible to live in a healthy body without taking such lives, right? Without killing those animals, can I live? Right? If I can live, there are other things, plants available, then I should only take the plants. I should not kill animals, right? So that's an important thing. So now let's move on. Can you see my screen?
There are 3 participants in the conference. The recording has started.
So let's start here. Okay. Okay. You can see my screen now, right? Please go ahead. I think Shubham Bhavni, take this paragraph. The human body
Yes,
is constituted of.
yes, yes. The human body is constituted of innumerable living cells. These cells develop and grow with the help of similar living entities. The nature of your living cells will be formed in accordance with the type of food you take. Ultimately, all these together will affect your mind to some extent. If the cells of the human body grow on rotten and bad smelling food or on the flesh flesh of animals in which mean tendencies predominate, it is but natural that the mind will have a tendency of meanness. The policy of eating without due consideration whatever is available cannot be supported in any case, even though there may not be any question of himsa or ahimsa. It should not be your policy to do what you wish. You must perform actions after due thought. For continued subsistence, a policy will have to be adopted for taking food, otherwise, it will be against the code of aparigraha. What aparigraha means will be explained later.
Up, aparigraha. Aparigraha.
Ap- ap- what aparigraha means will be explained later. The paragraph is saying that our body is made of different multiple living cells, and these cells develop and grow with the help of same living entities, and the same living entities formed by the food we take. So the food we take becomes our cells. Ultimately, all these together affect our mind. If if our cells grew on rotten or bad smelling food or on the flesh, then our mind will have a tendency to go towards meanness. And if we don't consider, without consideration, we eat whatever is available, is also cannot cannot support it. uh, th- there is no question of himsa or ahimsa, but it's not our policy to do whatever we wish. We have to perform some actions. For continued subsistence of a policy will have to be adopted for taking foods.
Yeah.
But can you? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to say something more?
No, I just got stuck on this line. For continued subsistence a policy will have to be adopted for taking food. For continued subsistence of a policy.
Yeah. So essentially means commitment. You need to have a commitment. So what this paragraph is actually saying, it's talking about the commitment, right? We know that whatever we eat, that has an impact on the mind, right? So the cells of the body, they grow and develop according to the food that we take. If we take rotten food, then the cells of the body also will take the, the qualities of that rotten, bad smelling food. If we take animals, then the cells of the body also will take the mean propensities of the animals, right? So the commitment one has is very, very important, right? So we hear a lot of people come and say that, it's not possible for me to do. I have family, I have friends, I have this, I have to go out for dinner. They give lots of reasons. right? And the reason they're not able to follow all of this is because they don't have commitment. If one has the commitment, right, then one will definitely follow. So essentially, how much of commitment one has is what is the key point over here. If we have the commitment to take proper food, right, then
Three.
uh, we will, we will make sure that we take the proper sattvic ahara anywhere, wherever we go, right? On the other hand, if we don't have the commitment, then we will not care. We will have hundreds of excuses. I am going here, I'm going there, I have to go out, I have to take my daughter out, I have to go there, somebody relative has called, I have to go, right? We might give thousands and thousands of excuses. So that means we don't have commitment. So it all depends on how much of commitment. This is a small example, right? So the environment in which we eat is very important. If everybody is at workplace, if everybody they are eating non-vegetarian food, and if you are eating sattvic ahar, then your ahara is no longer sattvic, right? So the smell from the other food will get incorporated in your food, and it is no longer sattvic. So it's important that you take proper food in the proper place, right? The environment is also extremely important, right? So when we have to go outside, we have to plan in such a way that we take good food and proper food, so that we are not in a situation where we are forced to eat something, right, where you're starving and you just get tempted to eat something, right? So initial stages where you don't have that conviction, then there is a chance for getting tempted. So you need to properly plan, right? In case you're forced to go out somewhere, you need to properly plan, and this all depends on the commitment, right? So if one is really committed, then you'll never be in a situation where you're taking the wrong food in the wrong environment. There is no need for it, right? And the point over here is the vibration of the food determines the vibration of the cells that make your body and your brain, right? If we keep this in mind, then it becomes extremely easy, right? If we want to have a sattvic existence, right, then we need to take the sattvic ahara. If we were going to take the rajasic and tamasic food, then it is going to have the rajasic and tamasic impact on your mind, right? Mind is going to become rajasic and tamasic. So we should avoid these things, right? The main things are onion, garlic, mushrooms in the plant kingdom, right? And all the animal food and very, very spicy food. Very spicy food will be rajasic and not tamasic. We should avoid all these things. We should mostly be eating raw fruits, vegetables, right? With this practice, the cells of the body become very, very sattvic, right? Then when the cells of the body become sattvic, then the desire for reaching infinite, right, that becomes awakened, to get in communion with the infinite, that becomes awakened. People often wonder why I don't have the bhakti bhava, why I'm not feeling bhakti bhava. You're going on saying Paramapurusha, Brahma, 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 you're saying, but I don't have the bhakti bhava. I don't have the attraction to the supreme entity. And one of the reasons for that is you don't have sattvic existence. You need to have a sattvic existence to awaken that bhakti bhava, right? So if you're not taking proper food, right, you're saying, okay, in a month I will take 2 times I will take onion and garlic, one day I will not take onion and garlic. We can have different kinds of rules like that, right? But that only shows that you don't have commitment. So when you have commitment, then you will take the proper food no matter what, right? So if people are not taking proper food, then it is one of the reasons that the cells of the brain become tamasic, because of the food that we eat. If you're taking heavy food, fried food, even though it may be vegetarian, right, and also some people take non-vegetarian food, so essentially you're not taking proper foods, then the mind becomes very heavy, right? In that situation, the desire for infinite will never be awakened. It becomes very, very difficult. Doing sadhana becomes difficult, right? So that is what this paragraph is saying is that the vibration of the body is dependent on to a large extent on the vibration of the food one takes, right? Everything in this world has a spandan, right? We need to remember that everything has a spandan, right? The spandan of the food creates a spandan in the body, right? We survive because of the food that we eat, right? If you don't take food for 15 days, you will see that your mind stops operating, right? Your mind, you will not be able to think anything, right? Let's say that you remembered a lot of slokas now, right? You remembered a lot of things now, and if you stop taking for food for 15 days, and at the end of the 15th day, if I ask you to say this or that, you will not be able to say anything, right? You don't have memory, you don't have anything. So all this just indicates that the food is what makes us, right? If you don't eat food, then the mind is non-operational. So by this we can understand that the mind is made of the food that we eat, right? So the vibration of the food has a vibration on the mind, and we should have the policy of strict, uncompromising attitude about food, right? So, and the environment in which we take, right? I should have a strict attitude towards what food I will eat and where I will eat, right? So if we are eating food in the same table where somebody is eating non-vegetarian food, then our food also becomes tamasic, right? In such an environment, I will not take food, right? If I have to take food, if you have to take food on the airplane, right, then I will take my food when their food is finished or well before they eat, right? So I will not be eating at the same time that they are eating, right? The smell of their food will come into our food, right? So that is what this paragraph is talking about. So this is very important, right? So if we don't follow the policy, the commitment on food, then we will not be able to follow the policy of aparigraha, right? Then it will be against the code of aparigraha. So what is aparigraha, we'll see later. Okay, next paragraph, Pushpalata Bhagini.
Himsa and the use of force are not identical. Sometimes the use of force may result in himsa, even though force is no thought in the mind to cause pain. Even though there is no thought in the mind to cause pain. When the pressure of circumstances compels the use of force against certain individuals resulting in himsa, such individuals are termed as atatayi. What is the correct pronunciation in Sanskrit?
Atatayi.
Atatayi. So actually himsa and use of force is not identical. For certain things, for certain reasons, we might be using force, but we may not have any thought to harm anyone. But in certain circumstances, we use force which leads to himsa, and those individuals are termed as atatayi. This is what this paragraph says.
Yeah, atatayi is essentially somebody who harms other with the intention of harming, right? Like Ravana, he was an atatayi, right? So there are two parts to this paragraph. The first part is himsa and the use of force are not identical. Sometimes the use of the force may result in himsa, even though there is no thought in the mind to cause pain, right? So here the point is that one could use force without causing harm. It depends on the intention, right? If there is an intention to cause harm, then the use of force result in himsa, right? If there is no intention to cause harm and you're using the force to protect yourself, right, then there is no himsa there, right? So it all depends on the intention. Somebody may cause harm without the intention, right? For example, when we breathe, right, so innumerable insects are killed when we take a breath. Here there is no intention to cause harm, right? Or if one is running on the roadway, one is using force. With every step one takes on the road, there are lots of organisms which are dying, right? Here we are using force, but there is no intention to harm, right? But when we take it one step further, when the pressure of circumstances compels us to use the force against certain individuals, resulting in such individuals are termed as atatayi in Sanskrit. So the point here is that if somebody is a wrongdoer in the society, right, and one has no option but to stop them, right, then there is interest of helping others and stopping the wrongdoer. So one may even cause harm to the wrongdoer, right? Compelling the use of force against, even whether one causes harm or not, one may be forced to use force against them, right, which we normally do not do, right? So essentially what this means is that if there is an intention to cause harm, right, with the intent, if you use force with the intent of causing harm to others, then that is not ahimsa, that is himsa, right? If you are entering somebody's house with the intent of murdering somebody, right, then that is himsa. But on the other hand, the person who is getting attacked, if he is using force to stop the person who is trying to murder, then that is not in himsa. So you're using brute force against them, but even then it's not himsa, because you don't have an intent of killing them or harming them, right? But because of using the force, if you ended up killing them, right, then you didn't have any intention to do so. They came to your house to kill you and you had no choice, right? So in such a situation we are forced to use the force. Over here, that is what this is talking about. When the pressure of circumstances compels the use of force against certain individuals, resulting in himsa, right, such individuals are called as atatai. So when an atatai enters your house and tries to kill you, right, in that case what you do is you are using force, and in that time that is not himsa, right? So here, who is an atatai has been given. Kshetra darapahari cha shastradhari dhanapahaha agnida garadashchaiva shad etehi atatayinah, right? Who are an atatai is given over here. So Shubham Bagni, you want to read?
Anyone who by the use of brute force wants to take possession of your property, abducts your wife, comes with a weapon to murder you, wants to snatch away your health, sets fire to your house, or wants to take life by administering poison is called an atatai. If any person or a nation wants to occupy all or part of other country, the use of physical force against such invading force is not against the principle of ahimsa, rather by a wrong interpretation of the term ahimsa, or by interpreting ahimsa and brute force as identical, common people will have to suffer from loss of wealth, happiness, and other hardship. So this paragraph is telling us that who is the atatai, the one who wants to take our property, our wife, or want to murder you using a weapon and snatch our wealth, want to set fire to our house, or want to give poison is called atatai. The one who wants to harm us, any person, it can be any person or nation that want to occupy all the part of another country or nation using physical. So in that case, if we use physical force against those invading force, then it isn't against the ahimsa. And if we term it as ahimsa, or if we don't use any brute force or any physical force against them, then we can have the loss of our wealth, happiness, and other hardship. So it's okay to use force against those atatais.
Nicely said. So in the shloka, kshetra dhara apahari means one who snatches your wife, one who steals your wife, like Ravana. Dharapahari. Kshetrapahari means one who seizes your land forcefully, who steals your land or takes away your land. Kshetrapahari. Then Dhanapahaha means a robber, one who steals your wealth. Shastradhari means one who is an armed person who comes and attacks you with a deadly weapon. An armed person comes and attacks you. Garada means one who administers poison to others. Then Agnida means one who sets fire to a house or property. Right? These 6 are called as Atatai. Dharapahari, Kshetrapahari, Dhanapahaha, Shastradhari, Agnida, Garada. These are all the different kinds of Atatais. Right? So this paragraph is explaining, right, who are the Atatais. Right? Who Atatais are those who are harming others by use of force. They want to take possession of your property or steal your wife or take away your land or murder you with a weapon, take away your wealth, set fire to your house or administer poison. These are all the Atatais. Right? So we need to understand what the meaning of Atata is. Right? Those who are harming others with an intent. And if anybody resists such individuals, then they are not going against the principle of ahimsa. Right? Then they're not doing himsa. So the notion about non-violence, that we should not use force to resist an invading army, right? That sort of teaching is not a teaching of yoga. Right? This is not the proper understanding of ahimsa. If somebody comes with an intent to harm you, then whatever force is required should be used to oppose them, and that is not against the principle of ahimsa. Right? So in the wrong interpretation of the term ahimsa, people will say that if somebody comes to attack you with force, then you should not attack them back. Right? They will say that attacking back is himsa. Attacking back with the brute force is himsa. And in that process, what happens? The common people will suffer. There will be loss of wealth, property, happiness, hardship. Right? In that situation, what is the correct interpretation of ahimsa is, in that situation we should protect ourselves. If some other country comes and attacks your country with force, then it's not that we're going to sit and watch. We are going to protect ourselves. Right? We're going to use force. Right? We are not going to go and invade others. But if somebody tries to invade us and tries to attack us, then we have every right to protect ourselves, and that is not against the principle of ahimsa. Right? Okay. So Bhagini, Pushpalata Bhagini, you want to take the next one?
Sometimes it so happens that people, instead of convincing superstitious people, injure their sentiments by their behavior. A perusal of history shows that antagonists of idolatry have on many occasions destroyed beautiful temples which were unique examples of architecture. They destroyed the beautiful images which represented the expressions of cultural art. All these acts are extremely violent because they cause severe pain to the idolaters, and consequently the idol worshippers adopt an obstinate attitude towards idol, even though they are fully convinced that idol worship is futile. As a result, not only is the spiritual progress of the idol worshippers hampered, but the progress of the whole human society is retarded. It is worth noting that even if any country, all the people without exception give up idolatry, the spiritual aspirants who follow the principles of brahmacharya will preserve images carefully in museums out of appreciation for culture and aesthetic taste. They will not destroy these beautiful works in any circumstances. Destroying a work of art also results in the destruction of the sense of subtle appreciation, and this is in no way proper. So some people, instead of convincing the superstitious people who believe in idolatry, by destroying the idols they worship, that is also not correct. So to lead them to that path of this one, that worshipping idols are not is not, oh, it's just superstitious. They try to destroy the temples or the idols. They are destroying the beautiful architecture behind the temples or the idols. So this is also not correct. If people want to follow the worship which they do not want to use idols, they should carefully preserve it somewhere, at least for the sake of the art work done either to the temples or to the idols. So they should not destroy the beautiful works what has been done to propagate that idolatry is superstitious. So destroying of work of art also results in the destruction of the sense of appreciation, and this is not proper. That's what is said in this paragraph.
Bhagini, rightly said. Yeah, nicely said. So this is what happens, is that it affects the sentiments of the Hindu people who are following the Hindu religion. So they get deeply affected, and then they also resort to the violence. So we have seen in our history where the Mughals entered India and they started destroying the temples and architecture, right? So this created this affected the emotions and sentiments of people, right? And this is how they had to resort to violence, and this is how the clash between different groups happened. This is not the right approach, right? In that process, what happens is the beautiful architecture where people spent a lot of time creating these architecture, right? They get completely destroyed. They destroyed the beautiful images which represented the expressions of cultural art, right? So these are all extremely violent actions, and they cause severe pain to the other party, to the other groups, right? So what happens is, consequently, the people who were following idol worship, right, it creates a kind of resentment and creates a hatred against the other group, and this results in a clash, the clash between two groups, and it creates a disharmony in the society, right? So the people are not living as ek manav samaj, they're not living as one human society, right? They're living as groups, right? So when one group is not convinced with the other group's philosophy or their superstitious behavior, right, the right approach is not to take up violence, right, but it's to sit down and explain to them logically, right? When something needs to be explained, that needs to be explained. So on the other hand, if you try to destroy something, then that is a extremely violent behavior, and it causes pain to the other groups, right? And therefore they develop an obstinate attitude towards idol worship, even though they're not fully convinced with idol worship, but even then their sentiments are hurt, right? So therefore they develop a very stubborn attitude towards the other group, right? And they as a result resort to violence as well, right? So it's very important not to hurt the sentiments of other people, right? So the society is not able to live in a peaceful manner because there is a constant clash going on, and people live in fear, right? People live in fear, like how in India, the Hindu and Muslims, right? There are several areas where people are always constantly living in fear when there will be a riot or when there will be clash between the groups, right? And people are always obviously trying to use their all their time and efforts in protecting themselves, and their energy and attention is all towards protecting themselves from the attackers. So obviously there is no spiritual progress, right? You need to have a calm environment for spiritual progress. So the spiritual progress of the idol worshippers are also hampered, and the spiritual progress of those who attack them, their progress is also hampered because they're constantly thinking about schemes how to hurt the other person, right? So it's very important to understand this point. If you take up the right approach for spiritual progress, then they understand that all human beings have ananteshana, and that is the manava dharma. If everybody understands what the manava dharma is, then they give up all these wrong practices and they start following the yogic life. They follow the principles of brahmacharya. They have the brahma bhava in everything, right? Then they will become spiritual sadhakas, right? So when they become spiritual sadhakas, they will have an appreciation for everything. They will not go and destroy other people's property or their idols, right? So in that way we can preserve the temples, we can preserve the architecture, because the time and effort that is spent in creating them, right? So if your philosophy is different and others' philosophy is different, the right approach is sit down and explain to them and convince them logically and scientifically, and not just going about and destroying their pieces of art and pieces of architecture, right? Destruction of architecture also results in the subtle appreciation of these subtle art forms. That is not the proper way to deal with these things, right? Okay, so we'll actually take one more paragraph. Shubham Bhagini, do you want to take?
Yes, again. While the mind is still attached to religious or sectarian signs or submits to superstitious rituals, it remains engrossed in crude objects. Any crude method to prevent such sectarian superstitions will cause reactions in the mind, and this will hamper sadhana. The best course, therefore, is to help these persons to expand their mind by means of bhavana, cosmic ideation, and only in that case will they be able to give up superstitions easily. When our mind is attached to religious things or some sectarian things and submits to superstitious rituals, then our mind will engrossed in crude objects, and these crude methods will do will cause crude reactions in our mind, and because of that sadhana will hamper. So the best course is to help those persons to expand their mind by the means of Brahma Bhavana, cosmic ideation, and only in that case they will able to give up all the superstitions easily. The thing is that we need to shift our focus from crude thing to subtle, and by involving in religious or some idolatry things, the mind will become crude, the mind will become small. So we need to expand our mind by the Brahma Bhavana or cosmic ideation, so that sadhana is possible, and in that case only the mind will able to give up all the superstitions easily. Yes, Padma.
Yeah, nicely said. Yeah, that is the idea. So the point over here is that the mind cannot attain the state of samadhi or suspension in the infinite by focusing on finite things, right? It's not possible. It has never happened. It will never happen, right? That much we need to understand, right? If the Pradhan Mantri has gone out of the country, just as an example, right, for some meeting with other leaders, right, and in the absence of Pradhan Mantri, can a pipilika, can an ant be the chair? Can the ant lead the country? Can the ant be the Pradhan Mantri now in its place? Right? The pipilika, the ant, cannot represent the Pradhan Mantri because it doesn't have those qualities that Pradhan Mantri has. Right? He cannot represent. So they could actually select another representative, another person who has those qualities to be, a temporary pradhana mantri. But an ant cannot have it, right? The pradhana mantri is not infinite. Therefore we could have a representative, right? We could possibly have a representative. If pradhana mantri is not available, then we can have a temporary PM, right? But in the place of the temporary PM, it has to be a human being who has those qualities and not an ant, because the ant doesn't have those qualities, right? But when we're talking about Paramapurusha is one and one only, right? There cannot be a representative of Paramapurusha, right? That Paramapurusha is Anadi Ananta Satta, and that Anadi Ananta Satta is only one. You cannot replicate that Paramapurusha, right? And everything that we are going to select in the place of Paramapurusha, it is just like selecting an ant, right? Just selecting an ant to be a representative, just like ant doesn't have the qualities of a prime minister, like that selecting anything else in this world which doesn't have those qualities of that supreme entity, it will never be that supreme entity. It can never represent supreme entity, right? Because none of those things have a qualities. Like for instance, if you're going to select a stone, right? If you select a stone, or if you select something else and we represent that as Paramapurusha, then that particular stone is not Anadi Ananta Satta. Only Paramapurusha is Anadi Ananta Satta. That stone cannot represent Paramapurusha, right? So just like an ant cannot represent Paramapurusha, the stone cannot represent Paramapurusha, right? Even though everything in this universe is made of that Paramapurusha is the only ingredient out of which everything is made, right? Purusha is located everywhere. There is no such place where Purusha is not located, right? But the notion of having one limited object represent Paramapurusha will not work, right? Will not work. So if somebody were to destroy that limited object, right, then it is causing an harm to the sentiments of people who are attached to that stone, who are engrossed in those objects. So that is not the right approach. It does not make any sense. It only exposes those who are destroying them that they don't have any sense, that they are worse, right? They have no sense. They are like animals, right? They are not dharmic. They don't know what spirituality is all about. They are not human beings. They are worse than animals, right, for behaving in such a way, right? But the true sadhakas, what will they do, right? They are in such a position that they can help others move towards the path of sadhana, because they themselves are involved in sadhana. So they are experiencing their proximity to Paramapurusha. They have deep love for Paramapurusha. So by their own behavior and by their teaching, they can inspire others to be similarly involved, right? They themselves are getting vibrated by Paramatma in their sadhana and having deep experience of love for that entity. So by their behavior and conduct and by their teachings, they can inspire others, right, to have their eyes opened and have a cosmic ideation, have Brahma Bhava, right? That is the only way. If they are going to resort to violence to force somebody to give up something, then that is not the way. That is actually ahimsa. Those people are animals, right? They absolutely have no sense, right? So they are going against the fundamental principles of ahimsa. That is what this paragraph is actually talking about. So we will actually conclude the session over here. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Are you following along? Pushpalata Bhagini?
Yes, Bhagini.
Okay.
I'm following. I'm also writing down the points every time.
Okay, very good. And what about Shubham Bhagini? Are you following? Shubhrajyoti Bhagini?
Yes, Bhagini.
Very good. Okay, we'll conclude the session over here. We'll meet next week. Till then, both of you think about how you can improve on your yogic life. If there are any aspects that you have not done in the past, how can I try to implement that in the coming week? Think about it.
Yama.
Okay, every week we are going to be thinking about it, how to improve from where we left off, right? That is what we're going to be thinking about. Okay, very nice. धन्यवादः, नमस्कारः.
धन्यवादः, नमस्कारः.
Okay, very good.